When people ask me, Allie, when did you know you wanted to be a teacher? It's kind of a hard question for me to answer because honestly, I can't remember a time when I haven't wanted to be a teacher. My mother was a teacher, like many teachers. Their parents were teachers. She was a single parent, and she actually had to take 2 other jobs to support my brother and myself. She watered plants at Denny's in the afternoons after school, and then she also worked as a bank teller on the weekends. But she kept teaching full-time, and because that was what was in her heart, and that's what is in my heart too. I remember when I was 8, I got a chalkboard for Christmas, and I spent many hours teaching my pound puppies and my Care Bears spelling and all the math that I knew at that point. And I actually even had an old grade book that my mom gave me so I could grade their tests, and I even averaged their grades so I could, they could have grades for the semester or whatever. Becoming a teacher has always been my dream, and I knew that in order for that to be a possibility, I would have to work really hard and go to college because I was a reduced lunch kid, or I guess we would call a gap kid now. And I knew that I would need as much scholarship money as I could get. I grew up in Louisville, and I was very fortunate enough to attend excellent schools. I was a kid who was bused all across town. I went to Zeke Middle School and DuPont Manual High School. I was able to participate in Governor's Scholars, which was an excellent opportunity. And then also, and then eventually I went to Transylvania, and that's where I graduated with honors with a degree in secondary math education. I was actually the only secondary math education major at that school at that time. In college, believe it or not, I was actually criticized by my peers for wanting to become a teacher. People said, well, you know, your grades and you work so hard, you should be, you know, reaching higher. You should be a pharmacist or a doctor or lawyer or something that would pay you a lot more money. And then when I would tell people, no, really, this is what I want to do, other students would say, oh, okay, so you want to get a doctorate and then you want to teach college, or maybe you want to be a teacher for a while and then become a principal. And really, when I said I wanted to just teach high school, that was something that was shocking. It also infuriated me in college when my peers would refer to teaching high school as their plan B. Like, well, if I can't get into med school, I can always teach. Or I'm going to, you know, major in history, and then I can always teach, as if teaching is such an easy job that anybody can do just because you've attended school. I'll tell you what, one of my hopes is that one day the teaching profession will be held in such high esteem that a math major at the top of her class at Transylvania would actually be encouraged to be a high school teacher. After graduating from college, I found employment. I actually went to a job fair at Kentucky State, right down the road here, and I was recruited to teach math at a school in Hampton, Virginia, called Phoebus High School. President Obama was there about a week and a half ago speaking. The population there is about 70% African American, and more than half of the students are on free or reduced lunch. In Virginia, there's no formal teacher internship program like there is here, and so I was not actually assigned a mentor. Looking back, I see that my first year could have been a complete disaster, but actually I got lucky, really lucky. In fact, one thing that I hope you'll keep in mind is that from talking with people who I know now, I know that my experience was atypical. The week before I began teaching, my colleagues knew this much about me, that I'd come from Kentucky with only the possessions that I could fit in my car, that I left my family 500 miles away, and that new teachers usually don't get a paycheck until at least after about the first month of school. Maybe some of you all have heard that in small towns there's a tradition called pounding for the new preacher, where community members come together and everybody brings a pound of flour or sugar or some other household necessity to say, welcome to our community. Well, even though classes hadn't officially started, my new colleagues in the math department hosted a surprise 21st century pounding for me, the new teacher in town, and I left school that day with all kinds of things for my tiny little apartment. I had pots and pans and old lamps, spices, and somebody even brought me a container of bleach. So even before school started, I knew that I was supported and appreciated by my colleagues and that I was a member of the community. My colleagues' support, as well as my administrator's support in the form of advice, teaching resources, and coaching, proved to be invaluable throughout my first year. On my very first day of teaching, So I was 22 from Transy, you know, and I'm ready to just change the world. A student actually came into my classroom who wasn't on my roster, and just, I guess he could smell, you know, fresh meat. And he just started cussing at me up and down, threatening. It was the scariest. It was a very, very scary day for me. And I realized then that all the education classes that I had at Transy, constructivist-based learning climates and teaching literacy across the curriculum, really didn't prepare me for some aspects of teaching, such as how to handle yourself when something like that happens. I know that if it had not been from the support of my colleagues, I would not be standing in front of you today talking about what it's like to be a teacher in 2012, because I wouldn't have made it. During that crazy first year teaching, unlike current Kentucky teacher interns, I didn't have a fancy portfolio, the big 5-inch binder with all the sleeves of the lessons and reflections and student data, and you've checked all the new teacher standards. But I did learn the importance of having strong mentors, how to reach students with backgrounds different than mine, and most importantly, how to ask for help when I needed it. New teachers need to be given the chance to make mistakes and to learn from them so that they can hone their craft in a supportive and collaborative environment. According to the NEA, close to 50% of new teachers leave the profession during the first 5 years of teaching. This statistic is frightening to me and begs the question, how can we make sure that new teachers feel supported and want to continue classroom teaching so that they can become master teachers? Those first few years are so important, and I really think that there need to be structures in place to provide first-year teachers with opportunities for professional growth without overwhelming them with paperwork and boxes to check. I really hope that we can bring that about here in Kentucky, meaningful, effective support for new teachers. I think back on my pounding experience and can now identify that as my first introduction to a professional learning community. Of course, we didn't call it that back then, but the core elements were there. Whether we are beginning or experienced classroom teachers, the most valuable resources that we have are each other's knowledge and experiences. We can better help our students when we have time to collaborate with and learn from one another. We can help better our students, It just makes sense that we become better teachers when we have opportunities to do things like discuss student progress, offer feedback on lesson plans, troubleshoot, and to put it quite simply, just learn from one another, sharing our strengths and building in areas where we want to grow as professionals. But listen to this. According to a recent survey from practicing teachers, the average American teacher works about 11 hours and 25 minutes a day. So it's 11 hours and 25 minutes a day, and only 23 minutes on average, which is about 3.4% of that time is spent on collaboration with colleagues. To me, this is alarming. If we really want to increase student achievement, collaboration time must be built into our school day. And that's another one of my big hopes for our teachers here in Kentucky, more collaboration time actually during the school day, not after school. I spoke earlier about the teaching profession and how it is viewed. One of the things that has changed my perception of myself as a professional and increased my satisfaction in my career is finding my voice as a teacher and becoming a teacher leader. A lot of people interpret teacher leader as an instructional leader or a coach or an interventionist, but I have found that it's a lot more than that. I got my first real glimpse of teacher leadership when I worked on my national board certification because it allowed me the rare opportunity to really reflect on my teaching, what it means to be an effective teacher, and what it looks like in my classroom when students are really learning and mastering those concepts. Anyone who has completed the national board process, like many of the teachers in this room, know that effective teachers connect every professional accomplishment to our own students' learning. And those of us who become teacher leaders do this all the time. Whenever I serve on a committee or I'm asked about a policy or I have to make a decision or how do I feel about this, I always think about my students' names and faces. They're always right here. Because I'm thinking about them, those specific kids, and how I can make school better for them and how to improve their learning experiences. As classroom teachers, I will say that we have a very bad habit, which is that we often shortchange ourselves in terms of our work. We think that our scope is limited, not extending beyond the walls of our classroom or school building, because that's what the media, social systems, as well as society tells us. The truth is that many experienced teachers have firsthand knowledge of students in schools, expertise in helping students learn, and a commitment to always learning more. All assets in any kind of educational change. We have a lot to bring to the table. Our active involvement from the start on committees like this can result in practical, effective improvements. This is another one of my big hopes. I feel very strongly that the more opportunities teachers have to lead, the better our schools will be and the more committed teachers will be to our communities as well as our profession. Taking my role as teacher leader seriously, I'm now going to speak honestly about one thing that's been on my mind, how we assess our students. You might hear this as whining, but I can assure you that it's not. It's my efforts to give you some insights into why our Kentucky teachers might be feeling apprehensive about assessments. I'm going to be very direct, and I hope that what I will share with you will launch productive conversations about improving the quality of and use of student assessments. First, I want to be clear about why student assessments are so important to teachers, why they're such a hot topic. Done well, we all know assessments give us an idea as to what our students know and what they don't know. They give us valuable information about how we can improve our instruction in particular areas. They help us gauge our performance in preparing students for jobs and careers. Assessments have the potential to play a very important role in schools. Also important in teaching is the time is when students are actually learning in our classrooms. Last year at my school, 42 days out of our 177 instructional days, which is about 24% of the days in the year, were affected by testing. Such as, and here come all the tests, that some of you may or may not be aware of, but they're acronyms here. So we have MAP, On Demand, End of Course, ACT, Plan, COSA, Access, Coyote, and Compass. This does not include 2 weeks of AP exams or final exams. So we teachers expect a lot from assessments because they take up nearly a fourth of our instructional time with our students. We also know that decisions about the assessments tend to be top-down. 2 years ago, I was asked to serve on my district's math leadership team, which is a group of teachers from middle and high schools in Fayette County who met monthly to plan for the upcoming transition to Common Core state standards. So this was in 2010-11, okay? We were assigned timelines and units so that we're going to go back to our schools, so we're going to share information about the new standards and use them to inform the planning of the next year. So we worked throughout the entire school year. And we made new units for Algebra 1, Geometry, and Algebra 2 without new textbooks or any new resources. So we're basically starting from scratch. So we did that for a year. Then in June, 3 months before school starts, we learned that we would actually be using Quality Core, which is an ACT product, since that is who was going to be administering our end-of-course tests. So Quality Core in math is not the same as Common Core, even though they have the same, I guess, roots. The units are completely different, and so we actually had to redo everything that we had spent a whole year doing, which meant we spent the summer of 2011 redoing all of our units. So for me, as a high school math teacher, assessment and so far planning has frankly been insufficient and quite confusing. But if assessments were giving me the information that I needed, that might not be so bad. Until this last year, the juniors who were taking the KCCT, or Kentucky Core Content exams, or I'll just say CATS test, I think we're all familiar with CATS, had that the juniors, they didn't have any buy-in, okay? Unlike final exams, AP tests, IB tests, college entrance exams, all of those other things they were taking. And so unfortunately, many of the students, when they take it one day their junior year, they blow it off. And this was really frustrating to us as teachers, not because we don't want to look bad or we don't want to be held accountable, but because we genuinely wanted the student assessments to reflect what the students knew and what we were teaching them in our classrooms and what they were learning. But how could they when the students didn't seem to see that connection between what was happening in their life as a junior, getting ready for all these things, and the test? They couldn't see that connection. I do want to pause here and to celebrate the fact that there are now some stakes attached to testing for my high school students. Thank you for the end of course tests. We're really excited about the possibility of that, just because for the first time the students actually have some sort of a buy-in. And now they have a good reason, so they have a good reason, and we do as well, to approach the new end of course assessments much more seriously than we do with the CATS testing, which means that we hopefully will get much more accurate information about students' learning. But a lot of that depends on the quality of assessments, including on how they are scored. So this year, we gave the end of course test in Algebra 2, and I teach about 90 Algebra 2 students, so this is what I've been thinking about all year, as well as the ACT, which is on March 8th. And so, we go to the gym, and they have the test, and we're all excited and everything, and then we get our scores back about a month later, and I got my scores, and everybody passed. And I'm like, they're all ready. We're ready for college. This is my moment. Okay, they're going to make a movie about me. I'm like so excited. So I'm thinking about what am I going to wear, the premiere, and all this stuff. And then I think, wait a minute, does that make sense that every student who I had in Algebra 2 passed? Even the kids who routinely math tested at a 4th grade level, or the kids who haven't passed one test that I've given all year, does that make sense? And just like that, all my dreams of Hollywood, squelched. And I honestly can't tell you how disappointed I am that the assessment that we had just spent all year preparing for turned out to have inflated results. And just think about the parent of the student who got a 14 on the math ACT, which 19 is the benchmark, so not meeting the benchmark. And this kid who's gotten 14 on the ACT always had difficult with math classes. Now that parent says, how is it possible that my child got 100% on that, Algebra 2 EOC? Where's the disconnect here? So my big hopes in the immediate term that next year there will be some tweaking to the scoring of the end of course exam so that it's a more accurate reflection of what our state students know and can do. I have bigger hopes around assessments too. I haven't shared the ups and downs of past assessments with you because I'm bitter or angry or burnt out, or because I don't like testing, or because I don't want to be held accountable, or because I'm making excuses for not all students being proficient in math. I want you to understand why teachers care so much about the assessment. I know from experience, and as I've shared with you today, what can happen when assessments feel top-down and teachers, students, and parents are not invested in the results. This is exactly what I don't want to have happen with the Common Core state standards. I see the transition to the Common Core as an opportunity for teachers, administrators, stakeholders, legislators to have real, open conversations about the future of public schools in Kentucky and what we can all do together to increase student achievement, because that's why we're all here, that we all have that same goal, and so I hope that we can work towards that goal. And despite what happened with this year's EOC, end of course assessment, I see now how the new curriculum, using the quality core, it really has benefited my students and their learning. I'm ecstatic now that Algebra 2, which is now a requirement for graduating from high school in the state of Kentucky, that it's more standardized, and I think that students definitely should receive high quality education in every high school classroom in Kentucky. And I think that with the new standards, this is happening more now than it ever has. I'm definitely optimistic. I think that we can work together to ensure our state's assessments accurately measure what students know and whether or not we're actually really preparing them for life after high school. Giving the ACT free of charge to every junior in Kentucky was definitely a step in the right direction. My big hope for assessment in our state's future is that experienced teachers will have a meaningful role to play in creating, evaluating, and scoring Kentucky student assessments. Our on the ground, or front lines, or however you want to say it, our expertise in that way could be an invaluable asset for our state. I'm not quite finished yet. I hope I still have some time. But I do want to go over some of the big hopes that I've shared for today. Okay, so number one, effective supports for our new teachers in our state. That has to be there, or else they're going to leave. So that's the big thing. And we all want our students to be taught by master teachers. So that can't happen if the best and brightest are leaving. Number two, more time built in the school day for collaboration so that we can have more time planning with each other. And we want to work with smaller groups of students. The RTI initiatives really lend itself for that to happen. But the problem is that we don't have any time in the school day to work with those kids because I've got 30 other kids. So, the more that we can do to make sure that teachers are working with smaller groups of students to provide those interventions, the better. Number three, more opportunities for Kentucky teachers to play meaningful roles in helping our schools improve. Because teachers really do care about what's happening, and I think that sometimes people think that teachers are just whining, and I just want to tell everyone here that that's really not it. We want the best for our kids, and we want that to happen. And so I think that the more that teachers are involved with decisions, I just think everything will be better. Also, I think that we need useful assessments that measure what students know and are able to do. And we want those assessments to hold us accountable, for sure, in the new evaluation system. And then there's that first thing that I talked about, which is that teaching as a profession will be held in high esteem. To be direct, I think that a lot of people think that teachers only remain in the classroom if we don't want to better ourselves as professionals by becoming administrators or working in college or whatever. And I think that that discourages experienced teachers from actually staying in the classroom. I just want to share with you, I watch Big Brother. Actually, I watch a lot of reality shows, but that's one of my favorites. And during the premiere, okay, I don't know if any of you all watch it, but there was a nurse from Alabama, her name was Danielle, she's 23, and she lied about her profession as a nurse, and she told her housemates that she was a kindergarten teacher, so they would think that she, quote, plays with kids all day, and so that they wouldn't know she's working on several degrees. She also noted that she didn't want her housemates to know that she was intelligent or financially stable. After all, the entering average salary for a nurse is $45,000 compared to $30,000 for a teacher. So just to make sure everybody got that, so she posed as a teacher to disguise her intelligence, ambition, and financial instability, or financial stability, sorry. And this just happened. This was like just on TV a few weeks ago. When I witness messages like that, and believe me, they're everywhere, not just in reality shows, I realize how tired I am of how my profession is viewed and undervalued, and how eager I am to work towards changing that mindset. One way I can do that as a teacher leader is to broaden my scope of influence beyond my one isolated classroom, room 126 of Lafayette High School, even though a lot of wonderful things happen there. I'd encourage the Prichard Committee to consider recommending creative ways for effective teachers to play meaningful roles in developing policies and processes related to teacher effectiveness. If teachers are able to publicly spread our expertise, Kentucky students will benefit from the improvements that we champion, and teaching will be considered a profession worth pursuing in our state. I'll close with the best advice about teaching that I ever received. My first year of teaching in Virginia, there was a government teacher, AP government teacher, and all the kids loved. And this was a school that had pretty low AP enrollment, and kids were like fighting to get into this class. And he was, he had been teaching for more than 30 years. He had tattoos, he had a ponytail, he drove a motorcycle to school. Like, the kids just loved him to pieces. And he comes into my room one day, you know, he's real chill in his jeans or whatever, and you know, he says, you know, it's nice to meet you, welcome to our school. And he said, is teaching fun for you? Do you enjoy it? And I thought, well, nobody's ever really asked me that, but I thought, yeah, I love it. You know, I get to sing the quadratic formula song, and you know, I love, you know, all that stuff. I love it. Of course, I love it. And he said, good. He said, as long as you're having fun, you're in the right profession. When you stop having fun, you need to get out because you aren't doing those kids any good. And to me, that's just the best advice I've ever received about teaching. And I know that effective teaching is more than just having fun, but really that is a huge part of it. And I don't know if there's a specific formula or recipe for a good teacher, but what I do know is that all students deserve to learn from capable, successful teachers in every class, every day. And I hope that the work of this committee can lead to that becoming a reality for all students in Kentucky Public Schools. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, is that a great start to a teacher voice or what? Wow. Let's open it back up on it. And Ellie, would you both come back up? And we'd like to take maybe 5 or 10 minutes to just open it up for a Q&A comment kind of a thing. And I promise you'll get a break to go to the restroom before we eat. But this is really important right here. We have two great folks here that we can have a few minutes to pick their brains. Madam? We have some microphones that we can go around here too.
First,
You're on.
oh, okay, thank you both of you for sharing your thoughts. And Allie, since I'm a teacher first, I got to go to you and just say, if we're in church, I was getting ready to shout amen, amen, amen. You know, the PLC is what we call What we do in my district is we have early release Fridays, and it's been very successful for the most part. I mean, a lot of teachers have, you're seeing more buy-in with teachers all the time. Because at first, many teachers resisted that, and I may well have been one of them at first. But PLCs, most everybody here, professional learning communities, is part of that collaboration. And we have early release Fridays, and we get 2 hours every week in our departments to have that time. And if it's used correctly, and I guess I'm bringing it up because as we move through this process, hope maybe there could be a way as far as our teacher evaluation or effectiveness tools that we can correlate some kind of model or measurement for those PLC experiences as part of that, because I do think they're so valuable. It's been very helpful to me, and obviously I think from your testimony it was for you. And then the testing situation, it's the same thing that I hear from all my instructors, but I just want to thank you for sharing those thoughts. And do you feel like there could be a role for the PLC in terms of our teacher effectiveness evaluation somehow to play in there?
Absolutely. I mean, the thing about professional learning communities is that there are different stages to your PLC, and sorry for getting the first couple of years that you have a PLC, you're really just forming the community. And I think it's important to understand that. You can't say, okay, you guys are on a PLC, and no. You have to provide some supports for those teachers and not how to collaborate, but put some structures in place. And you have to give them time to first form the community. And then you really have to give them time to talk about what it's like to have common assessments or to have common planning. Some different subject areas, that's very new for them, that all the teachers would actually use the same end of unit test or whatever. And then you can start looking at student assessment data and saying, okay, well, did we wanted this topic to be mastered? Did we really get it? Okay, well, your class, like, they all got it. My class, nobody got it. So what are you doing? And can I come observe you? And that's where we want to go. But I think that right now we're still in the first, kind of the more early stages where we're just trying to figure out what does that mean to work together, especially in the high schools, because we tend to work in isolation, I think, more than the other grade levels. But I definitely think that has to be a part of the effectiveness measure, because that's what we're doing. I think the effectiveness measure should measure all the things that you do as a teacher that make you better, and certainly collaboration is one of those things. So, I mean, yeah, I would agree with that.
Go ahead, Dr. Barry.
Just quickly, if we're in a history center, right? If you went back into the 1950s and looked at the class schedule of a typical math teacher, what did she do at 7:30 in the morning, how the classes were lined up, the planning, 1 hour planning period that he or she had in the 1950s. You look at Allie's schedule today, I would dare say that they're very, very similar. We're not going to create these PLCs at scale if we do not begin to do something very seriously about the structure of a school day. So I would encourage the committee, Stu, to kind of look at that very, very carefully. We've got to get away from one teacher being solely responsible for a discrete group of kids. We need to think more about teams of educators working with kids over time, years, to really serve them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing. If I'm teaching Algebra 1, somebody else teaching Algebra 1, and like we're all in a little area, we all teach the same class, the same block, so I have them for 4 weeks, and then we say, okay, give them an assessment. The kids who don't do so great, you go over there, I take your time, we get them on that kind of thing has to happen, and I don't think that will happen until we have those structures in place. And I think that release time is a great idea. I know a lot of districts have been embracing that, and I think that's excellent, that you're providing something within the school day so that it's not all, at 4:30 when we got to meet with kids and we've got to whatever. It's just really hard to have those really great conversations after we've been teaching all day long.
And I'd like to say that I heard you talk about supporting those new teachers in the classroom and how valuable that is, and I'd like to think that our Kentucky Teacher Internship Program is doing that. But Allie, you alluded to this, and based on the many, many new teachers I know, K-TIP is piling on to what they have to do, that big fancy portfolio. all those lesson plans, when really those brand new teachers, instead of all that K-tip stuff, they need that mentor in the classroom with them. And do you see that as true in what you're experiencing?
Yeah, I mean, I've been a K-tip mentor for, I think, 6 new teachers. And, you know, I think that the K-tip program has a lot of great things. I think the mentor teacher hours, I think having a mentor administrator is powerful. But, you know, I don't know if anybody's looked at one of those portfolios. I mean, it's A1, it's A2, there's this sleeve, and it's really complicated. And then you feel so bad for them because they come to these meetings and they're like, can barely walk because this binder's so big, and then nobody looks at it. It just sits on the table, and maybe the administrator like flips through a little bit and says, oh, okay, good, you got your task C. But to me, I wish that there was less of that paperwork, and I want to talk to the new teachers I work with on the reflection, having time to sit and think about, and not to do a task C, but just to build that naturally into their teaching craft. And then I think, and less time spent filling in boxes and more time observing other teachers. That's another big thing that I think that we're missing, is giving new teachers time to observe other experienced teachers in their building.
Top performing nations routinely have new teachers work with other teachers in a scaffold sort of way. So day one, even with the great preparation they don't have full record. They're not fully the independent teacher of record at that time. They actually team teach for a while, and then they kind of ease their way into the profession. They do that routinely, and I think they do it, and I know it's hard, especially in rural communities, but they do it primarily because they have more educators in their system that actually teach children at least part of the day. One of the statistics that I didn't share with you, I might just do so now because it has bearing here. In these top performing nations, generally 60 to 80% of all educators actually teach kids on a regular basis for some hours per week. Singapore uses retired teachers a lot. In this country, only about 45% of all educators teach children. I'll just finish the point.
Well, another thing I wanted to say too about the collaboration, my first 3 years at Phoebus in Virginia, it was built in the 70s, so it was like the open school thing, so it was no walls, and which was challenging, but you know, like a class goes to the library and we just have to stop because we can hear them and see it, whatever. But I mean, so we have these dividers, but what actually that led to is like my first day when I had that kid come and scare me, you know, quite a bit. Other teachers heard it because they're right there, and so I think that even though I'm not going to go on record as saying that's the best idea that we've ever had, but I think that it really did lend itself to a community where I felt like I was actually teaching with other people, just because we could see and hear, and we were basically observing each other without having formal observations.
Yeah, when we start promoting more 21st century teaching and learning, we want kids themselves to do more work working on projects. So if you're in a history classroom, you do the work of a historian. That means you're not always in a row and in a desk, right? You can be around a common table and can be around a computer. So we can actually go back to these designs because we're not looking for teachers just to stand up like Ben Stein, right? In front of a chalkboard in Ferris Bueller's Day Off. We're not looking for that type of teaching anymore. Stu?
Thank both of you for your presentations. They were fantastic. One of the issues that I see in the various groups that I work on is that the vast majority of teachers that I talk to, the vast majority of principals, and the vast majority of teacher educators want to do the right thing without question. However, and I hope it's something that this committee can address, we, and I'll take partial responsibility of that because I am an agency that makes policy. We continually put policy barriers in place that make it so difficult to do that work. The assessments that you just talked about, it's an enormous policy barrier to doing the work. The kinds of accreditation processes that teacher educators have to go through. the role of a teacher education program within a university, the kinds of rewards and tenure systems that teacher educators have to move through that don't value the clinical preparation of teachers. Things even like, and one of the things that I'm very concerned about right now is that the teacher evaluation and growth system that we're working on doesn't at the moment have a way to value the kinds of collaboration that you're talking about. We talk about teacher collaboration and we all believe it's important, yet when we write a policy that all teachers must follow, we pull them apart and evaluate them individually. And so I think one of the things that this group can do is talk with policymakers about how policy can begin to dovetail with the real change we want to happen, rather than, in many ways, it works against it.
That was a great comment, John. I encourage y'all to look in your packets later today at that. Unfortunately, it's a little pixelated. It's a photo. It's a screenshot of the Singapore Teacher Evaluation Framework. Take a look at that later, and if you are so inclined or interested in learning more, we can be more than happy to help you get more details about how they go about teacher evaluation there, which is very rigorous, and there are teachers who don't pass muster there with their system. But look at the criteria that are being applied. They are so different than what we are doing here in this country. There's a lot about classroom management, but it's buried inside much larger expectations and support for those teachers.
Gosh, I'll tell you what, let's take one more. This will be our time for our last question. We could talk with you all day. And before Clay asks his questions, I will say that we are videotaping this so we can come back. Diana's taking notes to be able to formalize this. So this is just great information, and thank you guys so much. Clay?
Much just a quick comment. I just wanted to say that from a business perspective, we see the people that are most successful are the ones that take the time to carve out in their schedule to plan ahead in the future. And so I see what you're talking about from a teacher's perspective, to not have that opportunity to do that together during your workday. So I certainly understand that aspect of it. But then, Allie, from your testimony, one of the things that you said was that when you were 22 and took that job and ready to change the world, I'd say certainly in the lives of those 15 students, you've already done that. And with your passion, it seems like you're certainly going to continue to do that for years and years to come. So we hope we can take advantage of your testimony and your leadership to be able to bring that to other people as well. Thank you all for
I don't know about y'all, I'm ready to do that movie on Allie. Yeah. Because Roger, I think we get our grandkids in her class, and that's what we want to do right there. So with that, again, thank you guys so much. And Becky, I want to turn back to you to get some direction.
Thank you, Allie and Brian, we appreciate it. Right now, we're running a little bit behind, but we're going to ask you to go ahead, and there's box lunches in the back. Get yourself a box lunch, enjoy. We're going to try to start back up at 12:30, which gives you about 20 minutes to eat. We want to keep on schedule.
School schedule.
You get first experience, what?
Yeah, right. Made it. Your other crowd. How are you? Yeah. You put together yeah, I heard.
Late. I hate to be late. I'm so sorry. No, that's fine. He said, "Do you want to go?" I said, "Sure." There you go.
The spot for me. These two
Spot just for you.
It's our new superintendent. By 9, 10, we're going to reach back to Prichard. Not really well managed. Massive undertaking.
Hi, sir. How you doing? I'm okay.
Keeping you busy? No, that's all right. How are you? Dr. Bella and all the two doctors over there.